Our master class will be about Shibori. I have previously shown such samples on my channel. These are samples made using the Shibori technique. They are tied in a certain way and felted. This sample resembles tree bark and is quite dense. It can look good as a detail of the outerwear as well as accessories like bags. Our process will be as follows. We will lay out the semi-finished product, felt it a little. Then sew it in various ways and finish felting it. Shrinkage rate lengthwise will be 2.5 to 3, depending on the thickness of our blank. Width shrinkage rate will be 1.5. We make it long because we will be sewing it at a certain stage. This book is called Japanese Batik Technique Shibori. It is associated with felt because the Japanese technique was intended for dyeing fabrics. Fabrics that were tied in a certain way. As shown in the photo, the fabric was tied with threads and then dyed. This dyeing is called the Shibori technique. Dyed fabric when boiled holds its shape. Like I have here in the sample. There are a lot of various pictures on how to dye fabric using the Shibori technique. The author is Janice Gunner. I bought it quite a long time ago. Here it is written that Shibori is a fabric dyeing technique that resembles tie-dye. The Shibori technique on felt also gives such a cool effect that a person cannot understand how it was made. I just took the felt and stitched it along the edge. The next row is stitched along the edge. Then I felted it, pulled out the threads, and it turned out so beautifully. Here honestly I don't remember how I tied it. Probably with some kind of zigzags. It turned out very impressive on both sides. It holds its shape. It is elastic and flexible. Here I put some dark viscose on top. You can just use wool or you can add viscose. Here I laid out several colors of viscose and they really shine. Here is just wool, so it's up to you to choose what kind of surface you will make. I prepared two types of wool. This is 21 micron wool, some kind of Australian merino. The color here is anthracite. I will use this as the base. And on top I will also lay out a bit of 22 micron wool. It will also give a good texture. I just like this kind of dark graphite color. You can use one type of wool if you wish. You can make it from one type of wool, but I want to use this wool somewhere. So I will add it to the layout. So the shrinkage rate in length will be from 2.5 to 3 depending on the thickness of your layout, that is the. For example, 40 centimeters is the length. We multiply it by 3, so the length of our layout is 120 centimeters. We have a width of 40 centimeters. Multiply it by 1.5. We will be felting in length, therefore the width is multiplied by 1.5 and the length is multiplied by 2.5 or 3. I will multiply by 2.5. My cushion is approximately 40 by 40. Minus a couple of centimeters, so 38 by 38. So I am now laying out wool, roughly outlining the contours of our cushion. I get 60 by 100, the outlines will be there and I will be laying out the middle. The layout is usual. You can lay out an orthogonal layout. That is one layer horizontally, the other vertically. However, if it is convenient for you, you can lay it out in a herringbone pattern or you can lay it out in a single layer. Just keep in mind that if you lay it out in a single layer, we have shrinkage in the direction of the fibers. I lay one layer vertically, the other horizontally, and lay it thicker. Then we will sew it all together. But first we will felt it. In this lesson we will lay out our blank sized 60 by 100. I don't weight the wool as I will not be decorating with fibers. I will only have wool. I will lay out a guide like this along the edge, a long rectangle, and then I will fill the middle with wool. Layout method is entirely up to you. Now I will measure to make sure I have 60 for the layout. Place the measuring tape like this and arrange along this tape. Don't try to make perfectly straight edges. No need for perfectionism. Arrange it as best as you can. We have a rectangle. I will be laying out the wool. It's faster for me. You can lay out two good thick layers vertically and horizontally. If you wish, you can throw some clouds of viscose on top by. It really doesn't have to be even, just lay it as you lay it because this is Shibori. The main thing is that there are no holes, no gaps. Here I am finishing laying out the wool with such a chaotic layout. Now I will add some wool on top. It turns out to be such a beautiful color by itself. Put tape measure away. I'll start with the light wool. I will stretch it like this and I will lay it out in some kind of chaotic web. The strands of wool are thin. If stretched like this, they become very small. It is very similar to New Zealand sliver. Let's take a look now. I will lay out half in light gray and half in graphite like this diagonally. They look different. I see that it's not exactly black but somewhat with a bit of a bluish tint. It's not very convenient to lay out. Have completely laid out our blank. Moisten it with warm soapy water. Press it with the bubble wrap. Align the edges. Now we need to either felt with a vibrating sander or rub everything with gloves. Felt with sander for 5 seconds at a time. 5 seconds horizontally and 5 seconds vertically. Don't hold the machine for too long. We need the fibers to just get interwoven, not felted. If you're afraid of overdoing it, cover it with a net and rub it with gloves. Also without overdoing it. After you felted with the vibrating sander vertically and horizontally, you can blot out the excess water. Just be as careful as possible so that the wool doesn't get pulled by the towel when you remove it. Or the fibers if you have decorated it. Remove the excess water and leave our fabric to dry. I leave it overnight. In this lesson we will stitch our fabric and felt it. If it hasn't dried completely, we cover it all with a pad and roll it up like this so that it can be gently squeezed. Squeeze it while wearing gloves because the fabric is only slightly held together and it might fall apart in your hands. Unroll it and take a thicker thread. I have a size 10. We also take the most convenient needle. I use a needle for leather. Triangular. The thinnest. I insert the thread and make the knot thicker because it might slip through. Now we will start sewing. We will sew it to reduce its length. We need to first stitch along the edge. Be sure to secure the knot so that it doesn't slip through. I'll make a couple of stitches like this. With large stitches in different directions, just like a zigzag pattern, we will now sew and then gather our canvas. Go straight along the edge. If you make very small stitches, then your shibori will be very fine, so we make different ones gently. Pull it so that we can tighten it a bit later, and let's move on. You can do this in vinyl gloves so that the felt wool does not cling to your fingertips. The tightening should be approximately 50–60 cm. It should match the width, therefore do not tighten too much. It turned out to be 55 centimeters long. I'll leave it as it is. Here at the edge, we secure our thread. Important point. Take a thread that matches the color of your wool so that later you don't have to remove it. Now in roughly the same way with large stitches, I will sew the second row, third, fourth, and so on. We gather our length not too tight, without overdoing it, and we continue like this until the end of the fabric. The distance between the stitches is 2 to 4 centimeters. Now I will sew the second row. I will show how it will look. Make a big thick knot, like this, and step back about 3 centimeters and sew again in different direction. So with one thread we start sewing and tightening carefully. Slowly pull it together. You can alternate small and large stitches. At the end here we secure the thread with a knot. So far this black grape wool hasn't dried completely, the wool is more fluffy. Other felt it a bit better. We'll see what happens next. I ended up with an uneven square because I pulled it tighter. The length is now 54 centimeters. Here's a closer look. This is the wrong side. You can see that it's not yet ready. You can leave the threads. Just make sure the threads match the color. That's the main rule. So let's start felting by wetting it with warm soapy water, even a bit hot. I slightly moisten my hands with fairy. We needed to put on cellophane gloves. Our hands move like this. Gently throw it 100 times. Straighten it out. I want to measure the blank. It has only slightly felted. I think it hasn't shrunk much. It was 54 in length. It shrank only by a couple of centimeters because I added a lot of water and soap to felt the upper layers that were coming off. Now you can gently squeeze out the water. Now I will roll it, squeeze out the excess water and then continue felting until ready. Throw it 100 times again. It becomes so textured. The wrong side is here. Now I will roll it again and throw it a bit more. Then I will go to heat it with hot water. Let's go heat it with hot water. Then rinse off the soap. Now let's measure it, because after hot water it shrinks and becomes denser. The shrinkage is slow, but surely it's progressing. Right now I already have a width of 47 centimeters. And the length where we were stitching is 50. The length is harder to shrink so. You can take it like this and scrunch it lengthwise and felt a bit more. I'll throw it 100 more times. Now it has become more square and evenly shrunk. We can just cut off these knots here, so they won't dangle on the finished piece. You can cut them off and it's not necessary to pull out the threads. Let's finish felting. We have a little bit left. We need to get to 40 centimeters, so felt roughly 8 centimeters more. Felted the same way and 100 times tossing. You can warm it up a bit more and rinse the soap. I rinsed it off. Now we measure 42. That's enough. We'll adjust the edges. Let it dry and then I'll trim these knots. This is how it looks. From the back it is flatter and from the front it is more bumpy. I'll leave it to dry. I want to show you this rug of mine. It also has shibori, but here it's thicker. It's decorated with different fibers, pieces of silk, viscose and neps. This is what gives the texture. In general, it was laid out on the surface and sewn in a certain way to create this tree trunk texture. I sewed long strips, so this is a slightly different stitching in shibori, but there are many other different stitches. The cushion has dried. This is how it looks. I've already tried it on chairs. Now I'll show you. It's textured beautifully. This is how it looks on a chair. It gives nice massage. It is soft and textured.